Okay, so previously I made a tutorial for a 3D endless runner game, and I was asked to add character animation to it. Couple problems. A, I don't have any 3D models that I can use for the character. And second, it turns out that I deleted the newest version, or at least misplaced the newest version of that endless runner. So I'm going to have to just make a basic shell of an endless runner here, and then I'll show you how to do the 2D animation that was requested. So how do we get the 2D animation into the 3D environment? That's pretty simple. So you just have your folder where you have your animations, highlight the ones that you want, and then you just drag and drop. Now, when you're in a 3D environment, a 2D image is automatically set to a texture. Well, we don't want them to be textures, at least not for this. For other purposes, like if you're applying it to a 3D object, yes, you want it to be a texture. In this case, it's going to be a sprite, so we don't want them to be textures. So come up here, change to Sprite 2D. Don't make any other changes. Well, we can get rid of Generate Maps. We don't need that. And then you click on Apply. And you can see how they look different now. Part of the reason why is the background is now transparent. So Unity supports alpha channels. So basically, if something is a background, then it won't show up. So now what do we want to do? Well, let's go to our main camera. And we're just going to rotate our view so it's closer to what the camera sees. So I'm just right-clicking to rotate. There we go. So now this is similar to what the camera sees. So what we're going to do is let's just quickly make the 3D environment. So let's go to plane. You can see the coordinates here. So let's put it at 0. Let's put this at like -2 so it's beneath the camera because I know the camera is at 1. And now that we're clicking on the camera, you can see a preview. So actually that's a little bit too low. So let's raise it up. So let's make it -1 for the Y coordinate. If I'm going through this quickly, like I said, the purpose is really the 2D animation, not the 3D environment. And let's scale this. So into the distance would be the Z-axis. So let's make this like 8. Push it out into the distance. So let's make this like 20. That's better. All right, let's click on our main camera again, and there we go. So now we have like a path to run on. So now what we're going to do is we're now going to put our character on that path. So we're going to Game Object, Create Empty. Let's name this Hero. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on Animation. If this isn't here, you can just right-click and choose Add Tab. So we'll click on Animation while you have Hero selected, and it tells you to begin animating Hero. So it's telling you what character you're animating, which is good because in previous versions of Unity, sometimes you'd have an object highlighted and it would get applied to the wrong object for some reason. So I'm going to click on Create. So we need to name our animation. We'll call this Idle Hero. And really, you can name it whenever you want, but I strongly recommend coming up with a naming convention. So if you decide to put the word idle first, then any character that is idle should come first. Now, what you do is you click on the first one. So this is the first idle. And this is the last idle, I can tell, because I changed the name of the images. Drag and drop it up there. And a couple things. Sample, that's the frame rate. So let's drop that down to, say, 15. Now, this is an animation where basically they're rising up, and then we want them to settle back down. So rather than having to have a command that tells it to play in reverse, it's easy enough just to take these and just drag them in. It really doesn't take up any more memory, at least not much more, because you're reusing the same images. And when you see it crunching in like that, that's just me using the scroll wheel. All right, so let's hit the red circle to stop it from recording. Now you could say, well, where is it? Well, that's an animation. Right now, the Sprite Renderer has none, but there is an animation there, so when we run it, it will play. But just for peace of mind, so we can get a sense of its size and location, you can just take one as a placeholder and put it there. Let's click on the main camera. You can see they're huge. You don't want it to cut through the ground. Okay, so we need to shrink them a bit, unless you want them to be huge. So a couple ways to do that. You can change the size of the underlying image by increasing the pixels per unit. So if you make this, say, like 200 pixels per unit, it'll be half the size, that kind of thing. But you'd have to do that to every image. Or you can just take this object and scale it. So we can do this, say, 0.6 and 0.6. And we don't have to change the z-axis because it is a 2D object. There you go. Yeah, a little bit big on the screen. See if we can lower them a bit more. We should be able to, since we changed the Y scale. Okay, that's just about right. Raise them up a little bit. Now, we'll make this slightly smaller. There we go. So now, we want to be able to change what animation sequence is playing based on what the character is doing. If they're idle, we want the idle animation to play. But if you press left or press right, then we want that animation to play. So first of all, we need to create that animation. So we go again, come here to animation. And what we do is up here where it says idle hero, we click on the drop down box and choose create new clip. So now this one we'll call left move hero. So again, I'm putting what they're doing in front of the name of the object. You can do just the opposite if you want. So like I said, whatever you do, keep that convention consistent. So now we want to create them moving left. So by the image at the bottom, I can see this is them shifting left. But if I'm uncertain, I could just click on the name and I can see it says shift left. So we click on the first one, and then that should be the last one because I can see by the image that it changes there. So we drag and drop these here. And again, we're going to keep that same frame rate. I believe it was 15. And we just cycle back. Now, you're not always going to do this. You might have an animation that fully cycles on its own. These do not. And again, you don't have to use the first one a second time because what happens is this plays through, and then after it plays through, it would come back here if you're moving left a lot. More than likely, we only want it to move left once, though. So we stop it. And now we're just going to add the next one while we're here. Create new one. And we'll just modify this. Well, I'm not erasing the other one. I just clicked on it so I didn't have to type as much. So now we've got right move hero. So again, keeping a consistent naming convention. And now the right ones start here. Click here. Bring them here. Again, set that to 15. Now, depending on what your animator did, you may actually have different frame rates. So a lot of what makes this work is really done pre-production. It's done before it gets into, what should I say, pre-coding, not pre-production because it is part of the production, but it's really pre-coding. It's up to your animator to make sure that they do this consistently. So a very important part of what you're seeing is really done off screen. There we go. Now we have 3 animation sequences. You can click on the drop-down arrow and you can see they're there. So now we need to manage them, and that's really what this gets into. So there's another tab that we need up here. It's called Animator, and it's not there. So if you click on your hero, see Animator as opposed to Animation, double click on that, and now you see the various states. I still have mixed feelings about the way Unity deals with this, but this is what you've got. So see how it says idle hero, left move hero, right move hero? That's not a coincidence. Those are obviously representing the sequences we just created. Well, they're showing it like this because you don't need to see the individual frames. You just need to know which animation you're in, which one you're going to, which one you're coming from. Orange means it's set to default. So we want it to be default as the hero. So what we're going to do is we see this line that's known as a transition. We need to set up a transition from idle hero to move left and idle hero to move right. Technically, we really don't ever need to move between left and right, that you could actually just go back to the idle hero animation in between. So before we do that, we need to create some conditions. So up here, click on parameters. You need to create a parameter. We're going to create a trigger. So it's just a yes and no when to move. So we'll make this left move trigger. Create another trigger. Right move trigger. Now, it's important to note naming it right move and left move is meaningless. That doesn't make it move left or right. It's so you, the coder, knows that that's the trigger to make the change. What makes it move left or right is what we're about to do here, and that is create a transition. So since idle hero is what's going to constantly cycle, when I make a transition, click on left. Make a transition, click on right. Let's just move this away so you can see that they're not overlapping. So now we've got a transition that says go out to this. Now we need a transition to bring it back. Same for this one. Make a transition and bring it back. So it'll go from idle hero out to left move hero when a certain condition is met, and then come back. It'll go out to right move hero and then come back. So what's that condition? The triggers we just made here. So go out to left hero. And again, I really don't like the way this is listed, the way it's presented, but it's what we're stuck with. So this is the condition. What's the condition that's going to make this change? Click on the plus sign. Left move hero, we're going to use a left move trigger. This one, going out to right move hero. Going to use right move trigger. So you've seen how the naming convention really helps. We call this right move hero, right move trigger, left move hero, left move trigger. The naming convention really does make this much more organized. So that brings it out, okay? But there's a couple things you need to know. See this? We don't want an exit time. In other words, we want this to respond immediately. So get rid of the exit time for that one. Get rid of the exit time for that one. And then on the way back, exit time is fine. Exit time is fine because we're going to set it up so as that it stops right when it needs to. Because that was part of the initial request that was made to me, is timing. So what we're going to do now is we've created these transitions. The thing is, this is a trigger. Well, we need something to set the trigger. That is done with code. So let's go back to our scene. So if everything is working correctly, she'll just keep cycling. She should not go out to those other animation cycles. Sure enough, she is not. So we need to make those triggers work. So let's start creating the code that will make this work. So right-click, create, C#, and we'll just call this hero con, short for hero control. We'll click on a hero, and we will put the script onto the object. So now we need to open up that script. Zoom in by holding Control and turning the scroll wheel up. And now we need to make those triggers occur. So it will be based on a key press. You can use a touchpad, a gamepad, whatever you want. I'm just going to use the keyboard for simplicity's sake, but it's easy enough to have a dual or multi-input control scheme, I should say. So if input dot get key down, that means it happens for just the one frame that the key is first pressed down. So if you keep holding it, this is still only true once. And we'll make it the letter A. And this is one of the things that I like to do. I like to test when I add new functionality. So debug.log, it works. Particularly when you start doing collision detection and things like that, you want to make sure that this is working before you start putting in a bunch of spaghetti code and trying to figure out where it's falling apart. So what's happened, the debug log will show up down here. So if I press the letter A, I should see that message. And I did. Okay. I'm not going to do that for every step, but I did want to point out how to do that. And we could just hang on to that in case we need it again. So, pressing the letter A key works. And we'll just put in D. We didn't change anything else, so I'll presume that it works. But you can test it if you want. So now the next thing we need to do is we need for that trigger to be set to true. So, get component, animator, set trigger, and now you need to type it out exactly right. So I believe it was left move trigger. And I believe it is case sensitive, so let's double check the name of the trigger. So we're going to go back to animator, left move trigger, so the M and the T are capped. All right, so now what's going to happen is this should now change the animation when you press the letter. So you press the A key, the left move trigger is set to yes, or set to true, whatever. And then, because of that, left move should now happen. And then it should automatically come back out. So let's press A. Now, if you notice, the character isn't actually moving. That's not what we're trying to do yet. We're not trying to do the actual moving on the screen. We're just trying to do the change of animation. And so, as you can see, it does indeed work. So now we'll just take this paste it here. Do right move trigger. Save it. And there's right move trigger. Okay, spectacular. So that really gets our animation into place, and that's the bulk of the request. Now we just need them to actually move. So what we're going to do is to the hero, we're going to add another component, physics, rigid body, get rid of gravity. Rigid body allows for the application of physics. So it allows for gravity, it allows for force, momentum, velocity. So now what we're going to do is when this is pressed, we want them to move a fixed distance. Well, the way you do a fixed distance is you tell it to move, and then you set a timer, and then as a failsafe, you can add in like one extra line of code that makes sure it's in exactly the right place. So we'll get rid of the debug now that we know that this is working, because now we have the animation to prove that it's working. And we will do get component, the rigid body that we just added, velocity, and it's a vector 3, we said, even though we're not going to mess around with z at the moment. And we are going to move it moving left, which means they need to move in a negative direction. So let's make it like a -4 velocity, 0 vertical, and 0 z. Now this can cause trouble if this is part of a larger program, because as I said, since this is meant to be a infinite runner, they're actually moving in the z-axis. So to the person who requested this video, you're probably not actually going to do this full line. What you're probably going to do is you're going to have a variable be set to this number, and that variable gets dumped into the main rigid body velocity statement that's moving the camera and moving the player. I might go a little bit further depending on how the video is, so you guys can see that too. So that means we want the exact opposite here. If you're moving to the right, then you need to move in a positive direction, and you'd want to move it at the same speed. So we'll save that. But this gives it velocity, and then the velocity stays. So now what we need to do is we need to, as I said, add a timer. Timers look like this. IE numerator. Now you have to create a name. Let's call this stop moving. Now, this won't do anything unless you tell it to do it. So, and it's known as this is known as a coroutine. So, start coroutine, parenthesis, and then the name of your coroutine. Stop moving, also with its parentheses. Yes, I probably could have waited until this was all typed out until I copied and pasted it, but 6 one way, 1/2 dozen the other. So in IEnumerator, you need to set up the timer. So let's have it move for like 1 second. So yield, return, new, wait 4 seconds, and we'll have it move for 1 second. Now, don't worry too much about what this means or does. Yes, it needs to be there, but this is really what you care about. You're saying, wait 4 seconds. How many seconds? 1. I'm going to wait 1 second. Now, if we've waited 1 second, we need something to happen. Well, we need it to stop. And again, to the person who requested this, you probably wouldn't have the actual rigid body statement here. You would just have whatever the variable is for the x coordinate. You would have that variable changed That way you're not overriding the forward momentum, the forward velocity. Let me save this. And that should about do it. We don't have the failsafe in here to make sure they're in the right location. There's also no failsafe to stop them from going off the screen. Let's see if they kept going. Let's go to scene. Okay, they did stop, so I just want to confirm that they stopped. But it looks like it's really kind of fast and really too long. So let's bring that down to 2. But since it's slower, then the duration won't be as bad, so 1 second might be fine. There we go. Now there is a problem because it keeps moving even though the animation isn't done yet. So this was another part of the request, is the actual timing. What you can do is, since there's not enough frames, so let's see, left move hero. What you can do, click on the little down arrow here to see the images. You can either have, first of all, your animator would want to have done this correctly the first time, okay? So you can fake it by reducing the frame rate. So let's drop this down to 13. Let's drop this down to 13. And now you get the idea that you can just tweak this so as that the animation matches how long they're moving. See, it's almost exactly right now, because if you watch, there's only like 1 or 2 frames extra there. And you could argue that maybe they're moving too long. So, oh, for one thing, didn't fix that one. And for the other thing, let's make this like, say, 0.9. And if you use a decimal, got to drop in the letter F, or else Unity gets confused. And there you go. It's almost perfect now. It's a little bit of a hick there, where it jumps back into this sequence. That even before the frames have been imported into Unity, that's where you need to make these calculations. You need to give these specifications to the animator and say, okay, I need an animation sequence that lasts 3/4 of a second or 1 second. So like I said, you can kind of tweak it in there. In a game like this, it really wouldn't matter. But in more high-end games, if you start changing the frame rate, that becomes very obvious. So I think that should do it. I believe that's the basic request that was asked of me. If you want to see anything built onto this, let me know, but that should do it.